Okay. So in the interest of posterity, Christine Clark, Program Manager at the Canadian Community Economic Development Network, where I organize StarCap, which is the Synergia Transition and Resilience Climate Action Program. So we partner with 14 Canadian organizations who are enrolling in a massive open online course called Toward Cooperative Commonwealth. And this course looks at effective systems change and how movements across the globe are engaging in climate action. This workshop series that you're joining us today complements that programming by inviting climate and community activists and organizers to expand on topics explored in the MOOC, bringing the perspective of their lived experience and the on-the-ground or frontline work that they're doing. And so we're grateful that Manvi Bhalla, president and co-founder of Shake Up the Establishment, is joining us today. Manvi will tell you more about themselves, their work, and today's workshop. But before we begin, I wanted to communicate some important details about how we're sharing this space. So we're following accessibility best practices. So the closed caption feature is enabled. And this workshop features a live interpretation from English to ASL and not a pre-recorded edited translation. So welcome to our interpreter, Kevin, who I'll be spotlighting throughout today's hour-and-a-half presentation. As well, Manvi will read aloud visual content that is displayed to help anyone with vision or cognitive disability, as well as for the benefit of anyone who's calling in. Manvi will also pause from time to time or call on me to read out comments in the chat. For any links that are placed in the chat that are too long to read out, we'll include them in a follow-up email post-workshop. So with that in mind, using the chat is okay, but we ask that if you could limit it to sections of today's workshop where Manvi calls on participation in the chat, that would be preferable. And also alt text has been added to the slideshow images. So with all of that said, we're excited to begin, and I'll pass it on to Manvi.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christine. And yeah, let's get started. I think this is like a very great intro. I'm just going to share my screen and just actually, before I share my screen, sorry, kind of going in the reverse order here because I'm used to just beginning, but this time I wanted to kind of take some time to just kind of speak for a second and then share my screen with what I just showed. So yeah, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge where I'm calling in from. I'm calling in from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Indigenous stewardship and placemaking upon these lands dates back over 20,000 years, or what we might call deep time or time immemorial. And so central to our conversations about climate change, we must be recognizing intersectionality and how this crisis is and will continue to impact communities across what is currently known as Canada differently and disproportionately. Through this battle to ensure a just transition approach towards addressing the climate emergency, we can't fail to acknowledge the bravery and leadership offered by land defenders, in particular, Indigenous women and Two-Spirit folks who have always and continue to lead the way forward under the most oppressive and precarious. Oh, sound quality is not too good. Is that, Christine, is that also the same on your end? I don't want to continue before, if that's the case.
I can hear you clearly, Manvi. There's a little bit of a click in your audio. But our other...
Do you think it's my earrings? I'm not sure.
And Christine, Amanda here, it may also be, there's still a couple people that aren't on mute, and that sometimes causes the clicking and some feedback. So just a reminder to go on mute, and I believe there should be, oh yeah, okay, no, I am now co-host, and so I will just mute anyone I notice. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay, yeah, if it happens to continue being that way, let me know, and maybe I can just change rooms and take the AirPods out or something of that sort. Hopefully this is okay. I'll continue for now. And yeah, So essentially, where I left off, I just encourage us to center the voices of community in the work that we do, take up less space where we can, and offer more to the collective recovery of the land and its peoples. It is my hope that everyone remains committed and engaged in fighting the systematic erasure of the rich history of the first peoples on this land. And we cannot fix a problem that has its roots this deep in colonization. We need to actively decolonize our practices as advocates. At this point, I'm going to share my screen. I wanted to end off on a quote that I often share because of how much it moves me and shapes and poses a critical question about futurism. This is from an Indigenous queer author named Billy Ray Belcourt. And the book is called A History of My Brief Body. I'm just going to share my screen now. Does it look okay? Very good. Awesome, thanks. So I'm just going to read this quote out loud. And what I often tell people is, if you'd like to, and if you are listening and you're kind of overwhelmed by the text on the screen, you're welcome to close your eyes and listen to the words. Or if you would like to keep your eyes open and engage and look at each other, whatever feels the most comfortable, please feel free to do that. What I try to do in what follows is shore up another kind of emotional atmosphere, one in which the museum, as that which governs native life, that makes our bodies into vessels for a vengeful past and nothing else, is emptied of its political wrath. I call this ecology of feeling, this anti-institutional world, joy. I could call it a number of positive feelings: happiness, exuberance, wonder, but with joy, I want to bring into focus a durational performance of emotion, one that is caught up in an ancestral art of world making in the most asphyxiating of conditions. Joy by and for the racialized is what I consider the practice of breathing, in what theorist Christina Sharp calls breathtaking spaces, shaped by the oppressive forces of all kinds. How do a people who have been subject to some of the country's most programmatic and legal forms of oppression continue to gather on the side of light? Under what period of conditions do they enact care under the embargo on care that is Canada? So, oh my goodness, I apologize, I didn't flip the screen there, but you can take a look at Billy Ray Belcourt's book, A History of My Brief Body, is where this quote is from. So yeah, now we'll kind of continue on. So I just want to mention as well upfront, I'm going to go through an overview just kind of what we're doing today, but I want to emphasize it's not going to be like a major presentation style thing. It's going to be more interactive. So for the moments that I do have like slides on screen that like kind of engage you a little bit, bear with me. We're going to get to some interactive activities to come. So today our workshop will focus on placemaking as a way to help ground us in our work and help us find our way through complex emotions that arise as a result of our need and desire to engage in climate action. The biggest takeaway from this workshop I hope to leave you with is that we thrive when we are nestled in community and when we work together on collective actions. This means acknowledging when we need to pass the baton to our fellow community members and take rest, but it also means we find ways and means to remain engaged in this work if we feel burnt out or overwhelmed in our existing roles. So a little bit about me. I'm a 25-year-old community organizer, and I've been working across a plethora of causes from women and gender diverse peoples, health advocacy, policy work, anti-racism and anti-oppression work, and intersectional climate justice work, to name a few. I'm an interdisciplinary researcher and currently a second-year PhD student at the University of British Columbia. And you can learn a little bit more about me and my personal work on my website, manvibhalla.com, but honestly, I don't update it very much. This isn't like a full-time job for me or anything. This is just like a passion. Most importantly, I'm president and co-founder of Shake Up the Establishment, which Christine mentioned. It is a youth-led and run, mostly volunteer nonprofit organization that works to promote evidence-informed climate justice policy and advocacy across Canada. So without focusing on me any more than that, I'll dive into our workshop today. But like following this, if you ever want to connect, I'm happy to Christine can share my contact. If there's anything you'd like to follow up on or continue conversations on. Before we kind of dive in, I always kind of start my workshops or try to start workshops where we do have participants sharing personal information or personal reflections, or we're sharing a community space. I want to set up safe, brave, and accountable spaces. So this first slide is that, and then I have two more, and then we'll launch into a little bit of background on climate change and health impact. So The goal of this workshop is to promote community connections, relationship building across groups and peoples, and horizontal learning on these topics, and to provide teachings that we can all take with us to be used in our work and our lives. So we ask that all personal details shared today stay within this meeting group unless there's permission shared otherwise to share externally. Sometimes people might share personal stories or reflections, and that isn't necessarily something that we want to assume is up for public consumption outside of this space. I also want to mention, if you are called in on something, which means to be called out, but with respect and love, please take a moment to sit with the criticism and resist the urge to be defensive or reactive. Usually if you take some time, the feedback might actually feel like it's coming from a place of wanting to support growth and support community building. Furthermore, while we encourage questions, it is not the responsibility of other individuals, namely those who are minoritized, dispossessed, oppressed, or otherwise systematically disadvantaged as a result of societal inequities, to put in labor to educate other people in this particular space. This is a space for connecting and sharing, and it is not necessarily the space to then do that additional labor to teach other people at this time, nor for others to validate or invalidate people's lived experiences. If at any point you want to remove yourself from this discussion, or you have kind of concerns or anything, you can message Christine, you can leave the call, no matter how daunting it is to open up about these discussions. However, I encourage you to stay as long as it feels comfortable, and it's important to remain non-silent on topics like these, which intersect with issues of racism, gender discrimination, ableism, and other societal issues. So moving from safe to brave, I want to move towards a place where we can center radical empathy-informed conversations. I ask that you engage thoughtfully with others, shared contributions, and also that you listen actively and be open-minded to new perspectives you might not have heard before. The design of this meeting is based around restorative justice, which means that fundamentally we all operate under the assumption that everyone here has rights, has and deserves equal worth, dignity, and voice. My role is to facilitate, guide, and moderate the discussions while maintaining actively a safe space. But oftentimes, especially in the Western tradition in particular, folks mistake this as me being the final authority on all matters. And I want to mention, I do have a lot of experience and I have professional qualifications that offer me expertise on these topics, but I am by no means the single expert or final authority on these discussions. I think we have a lot to learn from each other. My last point here is accountability and accountable space. So it's important for me to challenge us to move beyond safe and brave towards being accountable. The principles I'm sharing are foundationally grounded in the ethic of care. That is kind of a very intersectional feminist community organizing practice. And so this is not an exhaustive list written here, but for our purposes today, this means when you're giving your opinion on a topic, use I statements to avoid generalization, speak from your own lived experiences. If you're not sure, ask, don't assume. We're open to naming tensions, and if an apology is ever needed, apologize for the action, not the felt harm, and give credit where it's due for ideas and thoughts, because minoritized folks often go under-acknowledged or completely missed in their contribution. So there's some ways to help make other people feel very heard. Now that I've done this spiel, and thank you for hanging on, I hope that we can continue to engage in this space in a really confident and joyful and happy way all together. So yeah, this is a very quick slide. Basically, we're gonna have a really fun activity. I think it's really fun. The first time I did it, I thought, whoa, this has changed my perspective a little bit. And you might experience that, you might not, and that's okay. I'm really open to that. We're gonna have a group reflection, another activity, and then maybe a bit of a greater kind of discussion on coping strategies when it comes to eco-anxiety and eco-grief. Before I truck us through to all the fun activities and reflections, I did want to take a moment just to go over kind of setting a foundation of understanding about how climate change intersects with health, and why our conversation today, what is grounded in the breadth of the discussion surrounding climate change. So to quote my best friend and fellow co-founder of Shake Up the Establishment, Janaea, we are not insulated from our changing environment. This is a very simple sentence, but when I first heard it, it really did actually take me to a place where I thought, okay, whoa, this is quite profound. So as a little bit of background, my master's thesis ended up being on climate change related health impacts and opportunities for health policy and health systems to work to address this issue. Yes, Christine.
Hi, Manvi. We just had a request if you could slow your speech down a bit. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. Definitely. Awesome. So just to recap, I did my master's in public health and health systems, and it concerned like climate policy. Through this work, I learned quite a lot about this topic, and I just wanted to take a few moments today to recap some of the aspects that I felt were really important to this conversation, and just a little bit of breadth on this topic to help set foundations for all of you if you are familiar, if you aren't familiar. So climate change's impacts on our health are dire. For example, studies report that changing crop yields will worsen food insecurity and lead to changes in diets that can cause nutritional deficiencies. There will be an increase in food and waterborne diseases, but also vector-borne ones, such as Lyme disease. There will be longer and worse allergy seasons alongside an increased prevalence of respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. Beyond these direct impacts, however, we also have research reporting a greater number of impacts on mental health being. There is predicted to be and already measured to be higher rates of PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and eco-grief, which is the main topic of our presentation today. Particularly, these observations are to observe to a greater degree in communities that are most impacted by climate-related disasters. This can include especially those who are displaced or dislocated, who lose their homes or have other impacts as a result of climate change, perhaps due to flooding or wildfires, but there's many other examples. So another important consideration that cannot go unmentioned within all of these conversations is the inequitable burden of these health impacts, this burden that's forced upon structurally vulnerable groups. This can include women and gender diverse peoples, racially and ethnically minoritized peoples, those in the global majority who often have the least contributions towards global greenhouse gas emissions that are causing this crisis, disabled folks, pregnant peoples, the elderly, and a number of other groups. To me, when I kind of came to realize the social determinants of health and how these things relate to the climate crisis, I was really jarred. And there was a study, a 2019 study that was based in Toronto, Ontario, that found that green spaces, which we know enhance physical and psychological health and well-being, the access to green space was lower for lower income people, lower education people, and a lot of those times in areas of lower income living and housing, they were overlapping with identities of like a disproportionate amount of racialized people living in those regions, a disproportionate amount of people that rely on additional social support. And these people are having reduced access to green space. And when, as the climate crisis progresses, these are all compounding factors. So it's interesting to see how the social determinants of health, such as socioeconomic status, poverty, and affordable and safe housing, intersect with environmental factors. These populations are then being exposed to a disproportionate amount of air pollution. And there's also reduced ability to spend time in the outdoors, which really helps with mental health. So you can kind of see then that the picture that's painted with health impacts and climate change is not only are some populations disproportionately impacted, they're having a harder time coping with the changes as well. So here I want to take a minute to mention and acknowledge that the term eco-anxiety and eco-grief has also been contested a little bit. Oftentimes the depth and feeling of the felt harm as a result of the changing environment. Sometimes people feel that this term doesn't aptly capture the experiences of some Indigenous communities, as oftentimes many of these communities view the natural world and all of the beings as relations and kin. I don't mean to overgeneralize, but I'm kind of citing a couple of different scholars, and I'm happy to provide additional resources if that's of interest to folks following this presentation. But one example is Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass. I'm sure many of you have engaged with this text, and if you haven't, great recommendation to do so if it's of interest. And in this, you can kind of see that maybe these terms are limited and should be applied with great intentionality, because although all of us here might have experienced this, it might not be the best to overgeneralize and say that everyone experiences this exact phenomenon in the way that it's been captured in Western academia as well. So that's my spiel about health and climate. I won't bore you more, but I just wanted to share a little bit of my passions and interests with you, give you a little bit of context about what my view on and kind of where I'm coming from when I talk about climate change and why it matters to me from a health perspective. Yes, Kristen.
Thanks, Manvi. You're not boring anyone at all. There's feedback that what you're saying is very interesting, but again, just to speak a bit slower.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I want to get through the presentation bit, and I'm eager to get to the activity. So I totally appreciate the feedback, and lucky for everyone, we're moving to that now. So hopefully the timing of this can kind of yeah, it can be a little bit slower. I will mention I do have ADHD, so it's sometimes it is a good reminder for me because I will always quicken up. So I don't mind the feedback ever. It's really natural for me to want to get excited about the passions that I have. So yeah.
Thank you, Manvi.
Awesome. So at this time, we are going to slow things down a little bit because I'm going to ask if you have a writing utensil or something to draw on. If you can grab those items, it would be fantastic. If not, I invite you to close your eyes and take a deep breath and join us in doing this activity as a visualization exercise. So I also want to encourage you that I'm going to ask you to essentially not overthink anything that I'm asking. Go with what comes naturally and feels best to you with this exercise. There are 4 prompts, and I'm going to time it out for you. And in the interim, in between, when I'm timing it out, it'll just be silent, and I just want you to focus on the activity at hand. And if this means taking time to ground yourself or do anything of that sort, please feel free to do so as well. So the first prompt in this 4-part activity is to take 2 minutes to choose, then draw, write, or visualize a place in your community or anywhere in the world that you feel connected to. This prompt that I just read is on the screen. It'll remain on the screen if you need to come back to it, and I can start the clock. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them or put it in the chat, and I can read that out as well and answer the question. But I really don't want you to overthink it. Just kind of go with it and write, draw, or visualize what the prompts are asking. So, yeah, so I can start the clock, and I'll give you 2 minutes for this first one. Take it away. Christine? Sorry, how's the sound on this? I apologize.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, there's no cutting.
Okay, sweet. We'll
Okay.
yeah, so we'll go with this now. Sorry, my computer was prompting me with a couple of things there. So this is good with everybody? The sound? Okay.
Yes, it sounds like so. Yes, so Kevin is giving us the thumbs up. Okay, great. So yes, it's good now. Thank you, Manvi.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I apologize. I don't know why that happened. I use them often, but maybe I don't know. Thanks for the feedback, everyone. Okay, so we'll go to the next prompt now. So this is 2 of 4, and it's going to be a bit of a journey with this. So I'm just going to read this out loud. So please take 3 minutes to consider how you feel when you are at this place and try to list or envision all that it offers you. Add details to this place by reliving memories of your time there, and envision scenes with this place filled with the people, animals, plants, and other beings that you cherish spending time with there. So 3 minutes. And don't overthink it.
Hi. Hi, is that audible? Hello.
Hi, is that a question?
Yes, actually, I wanna ask, like, what's this prompts all about? Like, what we, I mean, what you're expecting from us, like, from this?
Yeah, I think that's the purpose of not overthinking it. I think trust the process. Because the idea is placemaking. The idea is to kind of be, well, I don't want to ruin the exercise yet, because I think it'll be fun if you dive into it. So if you feel comfortable at this time, I recommend just go with it. And I think there'll be a reflection period where we can share kind of what we got from it, if anything. And if you didn't get anything from it, that's okay too. A big part of this work, though, with eco-anxiety and eco-grief is sometimes there's a loss of agency. You feel like you don't have control over the environment that you're around. You do feel often that when you're involved in climate action work, there can be a sense that, you know, it feels a little bit removed.
Okay.
Like sometimes you're not
Okay.
working directly.
I got it. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So go with the process and see what you get from it, if anything.
But thanks, Manvi. Manvi, if you could continue, I'd like to hear you finish your thought.
Yeah, I mean, just to finish my thought there, this is a workshop in placemaking, and placemaking is this idea of feeling like the climate crisis is closer to home, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a way for you to gain a sense of control over this crisis and take part in it in a way where you feel like you are having an impact and you are creating change. So I'll share my version of this activity with you in the reflection period, and however you interpret these prompts and go about doing them is going to be okay. And in the reflection period, hopefully people can share how they interpreted, how they went about it. But the idea is to center in on placemaking. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight. Awesome. Okay, I'll bring everyone back. So we're gonna go to stage
3 of 4 here. There's a little bit more text, so I'll try my best here. So please take 5 minutes to consider what the climate change related harms are that this place might need to endure, should there not be swift action taken to ensure mitigation and adaptation to the climate crisis at large. What are the potential impacts to this space as a result of climate change? And what might that look like in contrast to the previous images you recalled? I'll caution that this might be discomforting at times, but consider it necessary in some ways to come to terms with some of these realities and not be afraid of the uncertainty that lurks having not thought about this before. Okay, I'll bring everyone back. And this is our last prompt of this activity. So hopefully this kind of brings it all together. I'm just going to read it now. Take 5 minutes to give this place a face. Imagine it being resilient, having adapted to the realities of the vulnerabilities it might have had imposed upon it. Take a step back as well and think more upstream. What kind of actions can you imagine yourself taking to ensure that this space and all that it offers can continue to thrive? Draw a list or visualize these actions.
Costs. So Pringle, he's just happy.
Okay, everyone. I'll bring us back. So now is the time I'd love to hear from all of you. And I want to preface it with I have tough enough skin. If you have feedback, if you have thoughts, if you feel like this is a great exercise, or if you feel like you didn't really get the point of it, like I'd love to hear any and all thoughts. So share whatever you feel comfortable sharing about this exercise. You can also respond respectfully to other people if someone shares something that you resonate with or you have thoughts on, and maybe just some starting questions for you to consider as part of your responses. It can be, how did this activity make you feel? What are some of the causes or consequences that you identified associated with the climate crisis? What are some of the solutions or actions you identified? So the floor is open. And this is a good time for me to remind everyone what Christine mentioned at the beginning. If you want to use the chat feature, we'll take intermittently, we'll read the chat out and catch up, and can also include those responses verbally in this shared space. So yeah, so if anybody wants to go, you can raise your hand and I can tag you in, or if you want to unmute, no one's speaking, take the floor.
Hi.
Hi, go for it.
Hello. Yeah. So this activity seems like to me like that as the prompt questions were there. So like you have to just think about a place and something happened to this place, like there was a uh, environment against the environment there was happened, and what were its impacts, and how the place was affected, and the last was what how its solutions can be implemented. Is that fine? Is that like I'm on the right track?
Yeah, those were the prompts. Yeah.
Yeah. So like as I saw the prompt, so I was back to my country, India, and like there are many like problems regarding the climate, and what like I visualize that like actually the one of the main was the deforestation and the plastics problem. So like every time in the name of development, in the name of new projects, every time there is some deforestation, due to which a lot we losses a loss of habitat and the loss of biodiversity is there. So which is affecting like really big to the India, because from the last couple of years, the temperature has been really changed. It's like in the summers, it's sometimes above 50 degrees Celsius, which is like sometimes like impossible to survive in that temperature. And still it's going on, but there's still, uh, the deforestation and the or other climate activities which are like affecting the climate, they are not being stopped. So this was that, and the solution is the only like one that stop cutting trees and like plant as you can. And the other one I mentioned is the plastics problem. So like plastic is one of the something like which cannot be, most of the plastic which cannot be recycled. It doesn't degrade over the years, millions of years, and when it's thrown into like water bodies, lakes, and everything, then it's much more harmful because our whole marine ecosystem is disturbed, and obviously it's going to finish one day if it continues like that. So these are the problems, I think, and solutions are what I thought is like there are many local initiatives going on in India, uh, which like small NGOs and which are all into this to save the climate of India, to save the environment. But still, the something is missing, and it's at the government level, because government is not at all aware. Also, I mean, government is aware, but they not at all doing anything for the environment. And day by day, so it's gonna be more disturbed in the future in the India. That's it.
Thank you for sharing those reflections. Would you like a few more responses, Manvi? Okay, I see that Braden has their hand up. Hi, Braden.
Hello. I'll just sort of read off what I listed for your prompts there. Number one for me, what I identify most with there is what I call wild water. So you have like movement, falls, rivers, rain, the oceans, specifically, its connectivity from the smallest stream to the largest body. Number two, emphasis on connection. From the summits of mountains into the upper atmospheres, down to the deepest depths of the ocean. Water is connected to everything that lives. Main concerns I have with where I live is rivers drying up, going seasonal, deglaciation, collapse of salmon fish stocks, or population, I should say. Stock refers to the commodification, right? So populations. Ocean acidification, mass die-offs there, and the increased humidity causing more intense weather effects for land-dwelling animals. This is something I really appreciate the presentation. Thank you to everyone who put this on, but things where my mind is at is in this number 4 prompt. Things I consider are like shutting down the Trans Mountain expansion pipeline. In fact, taking oil out of it, reversing the flow, putting other, more human benefiting materials through it after thorough cleaning. I go out and pick up other people's trash often. I would recommend, or like I would promote ending all new plastic manufacturing, like full stop. And tying into the Trans Mountain point, no new tar sand or oil expansion or exploration until like humanly necessary for whatever reason. And that kind of ties into my last point that I'm kind of more behind now is ramping down and taking, a deep account of how important industrial society is to us and ramping it down from the level we've taken it up to. That's everything.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Thanks,
Sorry,
Braden.
Thank you, Braden. Sorry, Manvi, I just wanted to call attention to the chat. We have a contribution from Yamila, who had to step out, but I wanted to read their reflection. So Yamila says, my reflection is related to my home country, Dominican Republic. The exercise made me look back at how people are mobilizing to bring awareness and care for the environment. Also, how my next generations might not experience the country as we know it due to the impacts of how the climate is shifting. So sharing some of those anxieties.
Yeah, I was gonna do the same, Christine. So we're all good. I think to my view, Janice and then Beth, but is that correct in the order that was selected? I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. Janice, you can take it away.
Thank you. This is a very, I'm really engaging in this exercise. Very nice, well presented. Thank you. I had a lot of feelings about this emotion, sadness, my eyes filled with tears a little bit. I have lots of places in the environment, natural environment, that are, I feel very special. But most recently, I have realized how important the human environment is and relationships. And so I've really scaled it down to my neighborhood and seeing people out of doors. A special place was having conversations with strangers, passersby, people in in a bookstore about really important things. I find if I'm really thinking about the environment and climate change and my passion for doing something, the topic, somehow the other person brings it up. I say a little prompt, and another person shares their passion, their feeling, their fear, their feelings as well. And so I feel like I'm a conduit a bit, and I feel it's very important to help people feel connected and not alone, and prevent some of the PTSD and the anxiety and the grief that we feel. And I feel better in talking with other people about climate change and what are we doing, and our values and our actions. I find that very helpful. So the middle part is the causes, and causes are, we all know what the causes are, like rampant consumerism and disconnection to the environment, and disconnection to our own bodies, because I think the earth is us. The earth is us, and so it's a sad thing that we destroy the earth, because it means that we're destroying ourselves. And I feel my role is connecting with other people who give me energy to keep doing what I'm doing, about being passionate and hopeful about the environment. The consequences, the negative consequences I see are fear and competition, which our society is already based on fear and competition. And if that continues, then it's not a good scenario. So it has to be of recognizing our fear with each other and linking up and working with other people to, everyone can be their best selves and heal people as well, and then we can heal the environment. So, I'm starting with my grandchildren and people I meet in my everyday life. I have the gift of having just moved to Kamloops, where I am now, from Ottawa, and it's precipitated that everything is new. And so I just, being forced to have new things is really a gift. So thank you for guiding us through this exercise.
Thank you, Janice, for sharing all of that great insight. We only have time for one more at the moment, but what I will say is that, if you do want to answer these questions as a take home at all for any of you, I really encourage it. So I'll pass it off to Beth now, but I want to say that if you didn't, get verbally heard today, and I really think it's still important to process the feelings that kind of might have arisen through this process. It can be a messy one. The first time I did it, I didn't realize how strongly I would have felt about the dog beach that I thought about, because I take my dog there, and just thinking about coastal erosion and the XYZ. So just kind of want to say that it's important to process these emotions, even if you didn't have the chance to do so in a community setting today. Beth, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks. Hi, yes, I'm Beth, joining from Treaty 6 territory in the city of Edmonton. And one of the things that lots of Edmontonians think a lot about and connect to is our river valley. And I am no different. I spend a lot of time in the river valley, just about every day of the week, actually, with my family. I walk my daughter to school through the river valley, and we hear chickadees and see woodpeckers, and see the occasional bald eagle, and coyotes and jackrabbits. We see lots of wildlife, even though it's right in the middle of the city. So my husband and I have been, sort of preparing ourselves for the changes that we'll see as best we can. But thinking about it really did bring up a lot of feelings. There are lots of things I can imagine. Losing more birch. And one thing that really hit me while I was thinking about this was something I heard the other day about, I can't remember what the disease was, but it was a disease affecting feral rabbits in the mountain parks, and not yet affecting native jackrabbits. But I think it's maybe just a matter of when and not if that happens. So as I started to consider the fourth prompt, I really got stuck there. And I think that is part of the reason why I'm here at this particular workshop, because, I think really considering this kind of thing, whether it's what we have to lose, or from in terms of the spaces that we love, or in terms of the way we live, or the privileges we hold, it brings up, so many feelings, including fear and anger in some people, I mean, probably in most people. And that leads in lots of cases to just denial or refusal to consider. So that is one of the barriers to taking the kind of action and the preventive action we need. But it also, just for me, I simply don't know, how do we do that? How do we prevent, now that it's here, how do we prevent that spread? What do we do with the wildlife that we're losing, that's so important to us, the insect species that we lose every day? Maybe not species, but certainly the insects, numbers that are lowered all the time. So that was a real challenge for me, because I wasn't really able to get past that. There were some solutions that I could think of, but I really got stuck there. So that's, sort of both my experience and my feedback, I guess.
Yeah, no, thank you, Beth. I think that was a really moving answer from on so many different levels. So thank you for sharing and for your vulnerability, and especially the emotional side of that. I think that that's a really natural response. And hopefully there's a few strategies at the end of this presentation that I can share, but this is a very long conversation that can continue into a whole million workshops. So hopefully after engaging with this conversation here today, all of you can kind of seek additional resources, and I'm happy to provide Christine with some that maybe following this workshop that might offer additional support. And then, doing this journey and going through this process. But I'm really glad you're all here today to even consider this on a deeper level, and coming in some ways to this workshop today, taking care of yourselves and investing in your own sustained impact in this movement and work, which is really important. So I'll take us to the next exercise. This is our second and last activity today. And so here, sorry, just the Zoom screen here. So if you can go to menti.com and you can type in this code, or Christine, if we can provide this, maybe I can provide this link directly in the chat and folks can just click it. This is essentially a word cloud. I wanted to have a simple way for us to hear those who might not have had or wanted to share reflections in the greater thing, like in this greater discussion we just had. But I also wanted to move towards hope affirming and dreaming of futures. As much as we want to kind of focus and ruminate on these problems of the present and the future, sometimes I tell my teams and the people that I work with, let's think about the future and work backwards and say, how are we going to make that happen, and focus on that vision? Because sometimes it's easy to get lost in all of the things that are going wrong today. And in doing so, you lose momentum for the progress that we need to make. So I call it imaginative policy making sometimes, because I tell them, let's do this exercise where we imagine what we want this to look like.
Let's think of utopias and how we move towards those visions and making them happen. So this exercise is dreaming. And if you could go to this link or this Menti, I'll give you all a couple of minutes to go. And then it's just an exercise where I want you to share words, and I can read those words out loud, and I'll share my screen and you can see people's contributions to this in real time. So some of you have already begun adding, which is fantastic. Yes, Christine. And I have a comment. I was going to say, for anyone not on the link, is that where you're going as well? Or?
Yeah.
Perfect. I apologize. I actually missed mentioning that. If you are calling in via phone or unable to go to Menti, you're welcome to jot down on your own end or brainstorm as best you can, or unmute, share these verbally. We can add them to this cloud for you. And those are my options for now. But Christine, if you have other options to participate in this, let us know.
No, that's great. Thanks, Manvi. Yes, if you, I can type in your responses if you want to put them in the chat, but also I just want to read out that link for anyone who can't access in the chat. So it's menti.com, MENTI.com. Manvi, can you read out there was a code there. Can you read it out? Because once you go to menti.com, you have to fill in this code 52306598. Oh, Manvi, you're muted. Are you?
Yes, I was talking. I apologize. Thank you. So I was just saying, for those of you that are doing the exercise, I'm going to begin reading the words. If you're looking at my screen, you can follow along. How the word cloud works is the words that become bigger are often ones that other people have also said. So it's kind of a good way of also seeing what our collective visions can look like. And I think that's also very hope affirming, because you can see it's not just you who cares about this. I think that is sometimes what we think. There's so many other people that are also doing their best, and they do care about this issue. So you're not alone in your worries. You are nestled in community of concern, and we are all working together to make these futures happen. So if anyone's having difficulty navigating to this, please feel free to unmute, mention it. Christine and I can help, or put it in the chat. We can help. Otherwise, I'll begin to read some of these out loud.
Sorry, Manvi, just before you begin, we just had a request for a time check. So for anyone who wasn't sure, this is an hour-and-a-half presentation. So we'll be sharing this space with Manvi until 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific.
Mm-hmm. And this exercise has about 5 to 6 minutes left to it. So if you're having difficulty navigating to it, let us know. And yeah, so I'm going to read this now. And just as a background, the prompt that you're asked to share words on is share up to 10 words that describe what your desires and dreams for a just, equitable, sustainable climate future looks like. I apologize, it says look like. That must have been me late at night with the typo. So let me take a read for some of the bigger ones here. Regenerative, green, inclusive, sustainable, healthy, loving, peaceful, joyful, justice. I might repeat some because we're continuing to keep adding to this board. Democracy for real, an interesting one. And if any of you have thoughts on any of these as well, please feel free to share. I believe at the end of this, we can circulate the final vision board here as well. So participatory, collective, nature-centered, youth-oriented, diverse ways of knowing, patriarchy ends, relational, slow, rights for life forms, invisible becomes visible, less pollution, de-urbanize, relocalize. I think that's interesting. De-urbanize, relocalize. Amazing. Does anybody have any verbal contributions as well? I really welcome any verbal contributions to this. And maybe I'll read out some of the chats. Susanna said, "This is so cool." Thanks, Susanna. I think so too. And it's great to see everybody being able to participate in some form or another, hopefully. And Braden said, "Utopia for me is some combination of Starhawk's Fifth Sacred Thing and Aldous Huxley's Island," which are some book recommendations from Braden. Thanks, Braden. The St. James Town Community Co-op. I'm not sure who that is, but hello to you. They mentioned Island is awesome. Not sure exactly what that means, to be honest, but I'm gonna go with it. Yeah, and Braden, I don't know which one you said. Oh, I guess maybe you're talking about books, this makes a lot more sense to me. Yeah, in the chat. So there's a conversation happening about Aldous Huxley's Island, which is a book recommendation.
Thanks, Manvi. I'm going to uplift St. James Town Community Co-op because they are one of our community partners in our StarCat program and are a very impactful and very human-centered community co-op in Toronto in the St. James Town neighborhood. And speaking of co-ops, I want to really just echo whoever wrote Democracy for Real, because yes, democracy in our everyday lives, democracy in our workplaces and our communities, which we can achieve through co-ops and cooperation. So uplifting that one.
Thanks for those contributions, Christine. And I think a word that has gained a lot of support, it seems, is cooperation and regenerative. Those words have blown up, as well as healthy and intersectional. Those have definitely become a lot bigger since I last looked at the word chart here. So with that, we have about 2 minutes remaining on this activity before I begin to wrap up and share some coping strategies. So if anybody has any final contributions they'd like to add verbally or in the chat, we can read out. I invite that.
Manvi, there's one from
Yeah.
Gregory who says, "I feel in the chat, I really feel a big part of the solution is nuclear fission, where we're going to need the power, but also we need better public transport."
Okay, so I'm going to bring us back now to the presentation wrap up, where I'd love to just share with you all a few coping strategies, with the caveat that there are so many more approaches and perspectives that one could possibly share. But I just want to make use of the time here and again, share some breadth and some foundation. And hopefully this is a common starting point for folks. Some of you from conversation with you today, I feel are at a stage where you might want more than what I'm offering in this workshop. And I think that's totally okay. For those that are at that place, I encourage you to continue investigating this and also reaching out to people. Like I'm one of those people, feel free to reach out to me, but also others in the community who are doing this work, who might also have supports and resources that they can offer you. I think conversation is the best way to learn. Being in dialogue is being, blessed with horizontal learnings from your peers and from your colleagues. So I just kind of want to mention that this is a workshop for everyone. And without further ado, maybe I'll share these sorts of 3 different levels of strategies that we could possibly discuss today. So, and I want to provide some tangible things at each of these levels. But if you have suggestions and you want to use the chat feature, or you want to mention, if we have time towards the end of this, maybe we'll have time for 1 or 2 verbal contributions and, continuing this conversation in your own circles outside of this as well, I encourage. So inspired by a workshop I co-created and delivered with my colleague from University of British Columbia, Megan Wise, I wanted to share these 3 different levels of coping strategies that I think are very important for you to think about. At the individual level, it is important to nourish your mind, body, and spirit, and consider doing so an investment into your work, as it certainly helps build a more sustainable capacity for long-term climate advocacy and activism. We need to make peace with the reality that this issue will not be resolved overnight, while still obviously encouraging all action at all fronts as much and as quickly as we possibly can. Additionally, it might be helpful to step back from doom scrolling. I know that's a kind of a draw. I read the news every day myself, but there are actually days and weeks where I think maybe this is the healthiest way for me to work in this movement. There are moments and times where I encourage you to engage by prioritizing stories that center climate momentum, joy, resilience, and futures. Building a sense of community is also important, and talking with your loved ones about your emotions, concerns, hopes, dreams. These are important ways to process these complex but valid feelings. When you feel it is necessary, certainly make room for disengaging entirely and take deep intentional breaks from this work. I want you to think about this as you passing the baton onward to your comrades and tapping them out when you return to this work replenished. Know that your engagement is long and sustained. It is not a sprint. So beyond self-care, what I want to also promote is community care. This is a critical ingredient that can help you ensure you are investing in supporting those who support you. I recommend, if you're going to be a leader in this, be a leader who centers vulnerability, be open about your feelings, and work to create spaces for your colleagues to share and relate as a form of support. Join email campaigns or lobby businesses, industry leaders to implement policies that align with climate science and climate justice. And join local or global climate movements or groups working towards climate justice, sustainability, divestment, or building community adaptation and resilience, because as Beth mentioned earlier today, it is already here. The climate crisis is very much here. Communities and peoples are feeling these impacts. So instead of ignoring this reality, in many ways, there is still like a lot to be done to adapt to the present day while continuing to work on those really necessary upstream solutions as well to mitigate further harm. A personal tip of mine, if you are absolutely at a point of devastation about this issue, is to remain engaged in other ways. Go work on safe housing or disability rights work. All of these are connected to and a critical part that is necessary for climate justice. These are not adjacent issues. These are all issues that matter. But sometimes if you're focusing too much on the environmental issues, for example, and it's just devastating you, the progress is not quick enough, remain engaged in social issues and be civically engaged in other causes that you know intersect with climate justice. Come back to doing what you were doing before if and when you feel ready to do so, but don't disengage altogether from caring about your community and the environment. Finally, in my opinion, the most important work is to work on actions at the systemic level, as these will help also return a sense of agency. They are the most impactful in terms of like policies and regulations and, you know, how we go about living in this world, sharing this earth, and sharing it with not only like each other, but sharing it with other, you know, beings. So at the systemic level, where you can feel, you know, a sense of returning to be able to control some aspect of this sometimes unpredictable future. This means calling for institutions to prioritize climate, mental health, and well-being issues in policy and decision-making, building systems of community care that seek to decrease community vulnerabilities, prioritizing reducing societal inequities, such as poverty, racism, houselessness, and ableism that lead to disproportionate climate burdens and impacts on marginalized and racialized community members. This also means voting for empowering community leaders, whether it's municipal, whether it's provincial, whether it's federal, committed to addressing mental health and well-being impacts of climate change, calling for rapid transitions to renewable energy systems to reduce the role of fossil fuels in magnifying climate harms, and supporting any and all initiatives towards a just, equitable, and sustainable transition away from fossil fuels. Some of this, I think many of you might have actually throughout this workshop provided very specific examples of ways that we can move towards this. And I think that, you know, continuing these conversations in your own circles is one of the best ways to not only bring in other people, but also, you know, come up with solutions for your local community and places that you call home, because so much of emissions reduction work and so much of policymaking work happens close to home. It's where you have the greatest power and impact. So don't discount those actions just because at the federal or provincial level or at higher levels or places where you might not have as much influence or impact, things are going awry. Really start local, go global. And that's kind of the way I think you're able to return a sense of place to your work in climate action. I just want to thank everybody for their time. And, you know, if we have any questions or, you know, verbal reflections, we have maybe 2 minutes before I pass it back to Christine. Or Christine, you can begin. And if anybody wants to share at the end, that's fine with me. This is just time that I wanted to offer back to this collective. So yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Manvi. Thank you so much for creating this space for us where we can not only be engaged intellectually, but also the, you know, that we can embody, you know, what we were learning and also pulling from within ourselves to speak and share and be vulnerable about our anxieties, but also our hopes. So thank you for creating that space to share. Do we have any questions for Manvi? Or if you're formulating your questions, I do want to say that, as I mentioned earlier, this programming, these workshops, this is part 1 in a 4-part series, are part of the StarCap program, which is a partnership between the Canadian Community Economic Development Network, Synergia Institute, and Athabasca University. And part of this program is a massive open online course called Toward Cooperative Commonwealth, Transition in a Perilous Century, which takes a look at systems change from a community level and really examines topics from just food systems to energy democracy to cooperatives. If you would like to learn more, registration, or if you're ready to register after our workshop today, registration's open now. The course starts January 29th, and you can visit synergiainstitute.org. That's SYNERGIA Institute.org to read more and to find out about registration. Also, the second workshop in our series is happening March 29th. This will be an online screening and panel discussion, and the documentary we'll be watching is Klabona Keepers, which is I see Manvi nodding. Yes, this is a terrific documentary, and it's a portrayal of the Indigenous community that succeeded in protecting the remote sacred headwaters known as the Klabona in Northwest British Columbia from industrial activities. So we'll have the screening, and in attendance will be the director, Tamil Campos, and land protectors. So we will be sending more information about that, as well as the resources. Manvi will send me some of the resources that she mentioned, and I'll be sending those in a follow-up email, along with, you know, again, I'll link to Synergia Institute for the MOOC, as well as to the Canadian CCEDNet network, where you could read more about StarCap. But thanks, everybody. We've got 5 minutes. Is there any questions? I'll just go to the chat. So we just have folks, thank you for all of this feedback from Susanna. Thank you so much for today's session, Manvi. Josephine, thank you, Manvi, well done. Thank you, this really helps me a lot, from Miss Acosta. We have a huge thank you to Kevin. Thank you from Pam Kapoor. Thank you very much, Kevin, for providing our ASL interpretation. We've got, thank you everybody. Please keep these comments coming in the chat. They're coming in quick and they're all full of positive energy. So that feels really great. Madi says a very good, worthwhile session. Many thanks. As your group reflection offered me a process that helped with my anxiety. Susanna has linked to, if you want more information about the StarCap program, there's a link in the chat. But again, I will share these resources in a follow-up email. So thank you, everybody. And I wish you a good evening. And we hope to see you at a future workshop or in the Massive Open online course.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for all the great stuff. And thank you, Kevin. Again, I know I talk fast, so I'm very grateful for that. And yeah, if anybody is interested in looking into some of our work and, there's anything that you want youth-led, climate justice related, this is just a small plug to check out Shake Up the Establishment. I can throw our website link in the chat, and I can also mention it out loud. So it's Shake Up the Estab, so ESTAB.org. The whole word is just too long to put into the URL, so we abbreviated it. But I just wanted to share that. We have a lot of resources there as well. And we do have some additional resources on climate anxiety and climate grief there. So explore if you're interested. And that's kind of, my goodbye to you all. So thank you so much for sharing this space with me.
Oh, and Janice, I'll send some information about how you can get on a mailing list and keep in touch with what we're doing with the StarCap program and with CCEDNet. So thank you for that question. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.